It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The Arkansas corruption that we're seeing in the headlines has irritated, I think, a lot of people in the legislature who are not corrupt. Not everybody is. A lot of them, most of them, I would say, are not. But at the same time, I'm not sure most people recognize how bad the corruption really is. You know what I'm saying? A few of them do. I think people like Senator Terry Rice, Linda Collins Smith, Bill Sample, who called immediately for the resignation of Jeremy Hutchinson. I think they recognize how bad it is. And I also think that State Representative Grant Hodges recognizes how bad it is as well. End this letter. Can you throw that up on the screen? Let's show everybody. June 18th, so this was a couple of days ago. Representative Grant Hodges calls for ethics and election reform. Quote, I believe it's time for the people's representatives in Little Rock to step up and take a hard look at making our state government more transparent and accountable. Joining us now, we have State Representative Grant Hodges on the line. Grant, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hey, Paul. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really glad that you came on, could come on, and I'm just wanted to give you a platform because I really think it's powerful that you're, calling for more transparency in our government. What do you have in mind?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it. Really what I'm proposing or thinking through to maybe tackle this corruption issue that we're having, or at least offer some ideas, because I haven't seen too many ideas, at least for legislative changes. The first is one that some other folks have discussed already, is disclosure from our candidates and elected officials. So, just tightening that up and looking at what the federal government requires and what other states around the country require for their elected officials to disclose. I think we all know there are some gaps in our current disclosure system. If you're an attorney or if you're doing consulting or something like that, then it's pretty easy to mask how you're getting your income. Second is looking at how the state could improve our investigations and prosecutions of public corruption. So, my question lately has been, why does it seem like it's only the federal government, only the FBI and the U.S. prosecuting attorneys, U.S. Attorney's Office who's investigating and prosecuting these cases? Because it's not, public corruption is not just under the purview of the federal government.
Why do you think that is? Have you got an answer when you ask that question?
Yeah, the answer I've gotten so far seems to be that, really they seem better equipped with, our current law and the current way we're resourcing the state. So, the FBI just has resources that the state police maybe doesn't, or, whether that's manpower or equipment or maybe statutory authority. But really, Arkansas, we have public corruption laws on the books. We have a state police. We have state prosecuting attorneys, and they do work with the FBI. And in a lot of cases, they're doing great work, and we appreciate it. But I think we need to look at maybe the state could step up our investigations and enforcement because I'm not sure that we're really fully utilizing the resources that we have in the state to investigate and prosecute these kind of things. And so I think that's worth looking at because I guess my feeling is really in Arkansas we're not really doing our share of the work, I guess. I would like to see the state really sort of step up and take a lead and say we're not going to tolerate any more of this. Mm-hmm. And we're going to give our state the tools to investigate and prosecute corruption. So that it's not just the FBI and the U.S. attorneys that are handling these cases.
I think that's a really good idea, and I've asked the same question. Where is the state of Arkansas when it comes to this whole thing? And a lot of the new Senate ethics proposals has to do with, members. I guess I'm going to use the word tattling on each other, and the idea is like that they are going to police themselves, they are going to grade their own papers. That's kind of, I don't know why that's not happening now. I mean, I know they want to do something, but I kind of am skeptical. Why hasn't that happened now? There's nothing stopping many of these people from going to the Ethics Commission right now, and that hasn't happened. You talk in your letter, we're talking with State Representative Grant Hodges from District 96, and that's out of Rogers, right, Grant?
Yes, sir,
okay.
That's right.
So you talk about in your letter permanently changing the system, and I think that's a really good goal. You say too often our policies are reactive and a whack-a-mole approach. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I actually started writing this back in February. I pulled it up the other day, and I started writing this back in February. And so, yeah, it's not a reaction to anything that's recent. Obviously, things have been happening lately, but too often in the legislature we just sort of respond to the issue of the day. We're not really trying to think more long term. And so I know some folks think, well, these cases are being caught. These bad actors are being caught, and they are being prosecuted. They are being punished, and that's true. A lot of these are. But there's probably cases that aren't being caught, and the fact is, it does keep happening. So, we may not ever be perfect. There will always be people who don't follow the rules, don't follow the law. But I think we need to ask ourselves, how do we look longer term and say, how can we prevent this from happening in the future? Or how can we be better equipped to respond to it than we are now in the future? And so that's what I'm trying to look at. And I say in the letter, I think we need to look at maybe the state attorney general being involved here, maybe having a public corruption unit in the AG's office. I know I've looked around. It seems like the majority of other state AGs have a public corruption unit, and that would give us another set of eyes for this sort of thing. And then lastly, in the letter, I talk about potentially instituting recall elections in Arkansas.
That was my favorite part, and yeah, maybe it's because I have a few in mind that I would love to recall, but so has that one gotten any pushback? I mean, if the Arkansas General Assembly were to actually pass a law that made recall elections of themselves possible, that would be, that'd be a big deal. I would give them kudos if they did that.
Yeah, I think of what I'm proposing, that's probably going to be the toughest one, and it could end up having to be a constitutional amendment. I'm going to have to look into that, but as I say in the letter, there are already 19 states in the country that have recall elections, and I didn't know until I started researching, but Arkansas already has recall elections for our local officials. So you can recall mayors and county judges and folks like that, which I wasn't aware of, but essentially you just have to get a certain number of petition signatures, which would be spelled out in the law, and if that amount of signatures is met, then it would trigger an election, and the incumbent politician would have a chance to make their case for why they shouldn't be kicked out of office. But there would be probably something like a 3-month campaign to decide whether or not to recall that official. And the reasons that I've kind of worked through are, one, right now we have basically no political remedy for removing a corrupt public official from their office. We have stuff like impeachment, or maybe we could expel a member of our body, but we haven't ever seen that happen that I'm aware of, and just because of the way the legislature works, where everyone knows everyone, and to expel a member or impeach someone, it just seems like that's never something that the bodies are willing to do. So, recall would be, I think, a political remedy for the people in that district to decide. We're not talking about a legal remedy here. We're not trying to say you're guilty of a crime, but the people of that district saying, you violated our trust. You're not who we thought you were. We don't want you to hold the position that we elected you to. And this would give them an ability to recall them from office. And then secondly, we've seen time and again in cases like this, the public official will use their elected office as a bargaining chip in negotiations with the prosecution. So, if they've done something corrupt and they've been caught, then and a lot of times, not just in Arkansas but other states, they'll negotiate and say, well, if you'll drop charge, all the charges, or reduce my charges, then I'll resign. And with recall, I think this gives a chance for the people to say, well, maybe we don't think you should be able to use your elected office to help you, get out of the crimes you committed.
Wow.
And they could make that decision and recall them from office.
That's a really good point. I've never thought of it that way, about how they do use it as a bargaining chip. I think about Jake Files, for example. I think about how all of the reports about what he had done, falsifying the bids for other companies so that he could get the lowest bid and get the general improvement. I mean, we knew about that a full 12 months before he pled guilty. And so, I mean, if you just take that example, Grant, I mean, if the people of Fort Smith would have had the ability to recall him, I think they would have gotten the signatures immediately. I mean, the stuff that was out about him, and then when you had the sworn FBI affidavit, you had that, I think, 6 months before. And I'm just round figures, but I mean, that was an FBI that was an affidavit by an FBI agent under penalty of perjury, accusing him of crimes, and the very crimes that he pled guilty to months later. So I think you're onto something here,
Right.
Grant Hodges. I don't know if you're going to be a big hit at the next caucus meeting, but I think you're onto something.
Yeah, well, that's never my priority, but I agree with you. And a lot of these cases we've seen, it does seem to come to a head later in the term. But you could have a situation where take a senator who's elected to a 4-year term. They could, something like this could pop up in their first year, and really there's nothing the voters could do for another 3.5, 4 years. So. I think it gives us just another tool to hold people accountable, and we'll see how other people react. But one other thing, and this isn't in my letter, but it came up as I've been looking into this more. Is I don't know if anyone's talked about, if you're convicted of something while you're holding public office, then I don't think you should be able to keep your state pension either. I don't know if that's something you've heard, but I think we should look at that as well. If you're convicted of crimes while holding your public office, then you forfeit your state retirement, state pension.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I have heard that. I think that makes complete sense. You've betrayed the trust of the people. Why should the people be obligated to fund anything you do in the future? And that's a really good thing to do. So just real quick, what's the, because I had sources that said that the House was putting together a letter. I haven't seen that letter. That is, kind of a unified statement about the state of Arkansas corruption and the stuff we're seeing in the headlines. I guess that's been put on hold or what. I mean, you have this letter, but was there, talks going on between you guys about maybe putting out a joint statement? And if so, where is it, or is it dead? Is it not going to happen?
Well, I know the Republican House caucus had a statement they were going to release. My understanding was that was going to go out earlier this week. So if it hasn't, then I don't know where that is. As far as something coming from the full body, that I don't know. I have spoken to the speaker and told him that I was working on this, and just informed him of what I was proposing. And I do know that they are actively working on something. I don't know exactly what the details there are. I'm not really a part of those discussions yet, but I imagine something will be coming. I think they were looking at what the Senate was doing, and then because of the change with the speaker, that delayed the House a little bit, I think. But I would imagine something will be coming out soon. Okay.
Well, hey, State Representative Grant Hodges, I always appreciate having you on, and I really appreciate you stepping up with this letter, and it's certainly a sign of leadership, and I appreciate that, and I know your district does and the whole state does.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate what you do, and appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
All righty. Have a great day. State Representative Grant Hodges, everybody. We're going to take a break and be back in just a moment.